So let's try the zigzag stitch on our machine. So on this B325, it's just our number 2 stitch. We're going to press that, and you're going to notice that immediately on the screen it tells me I'm doing the number 2 stitch, and then it shows me what my settings are. So on this setting I've got 1.5 for the stitch length and then 3 for the width. So let's try it at the machine settings and then we'll make some adjustments. So I've got my little scrap folded in half. I'm going to slide that under the presser foot, and I'll lower the presser foot down, and then I'm going to step on the pedal. I'm going to go forward. So we'll do a couple more stitches, and then let's try adjusting some of the variables in terms of the length and the width and see what that does. So this is just the standard zigzag that it is set to automatically. So it's sort of middle width, but we could go wider. So let's start by doing a wider zigzag stitch. So we're going to increase the stitch width by making this number go as far, let's go as far as it goes on this machine. That's 5.5. So it just means the needle is going to go further from left to right. So we're going to have 5.5 millimeters back and forth in terms of the distance between the stitch. So now let's see what that looks like. You can see the needle is going further back and forth. Nice wide stitch. And then let's then increase the length. So if our length gets longer, then there's going to be more space in between the stitches. And then if the stitches get smaller, they're going to be much closer together. And so depending on what it is that you're trying to do with your stitch and what you're trying to achieve, you can adjust the length and the width to make the zigzag look the way that you want it to look. And another thing that you're going to notice is that I'm not even really touching the fabric. So this is the beauty of the sewing machine, is that it is really doing a lot of the work for you. Those feed dogs are moving the fabric forward. So what you want to do mostly with your hands is you're just guiding the fabric. You're kind of wanting to keep it oftentimes in a straight line, or if you're following a shape or a curve, then you want to be paying attention to that as well. Let's make our stitch width a little bit skinnier. Now we've done a really wide zigzag. Let's do a really skinny one. So let's go skinnier, go 1.5, and then we'll step on our pedal. You can see now that's a very skinny zigzag stitch, but now it's still really close together. So you can play around with the settings on the machine. You can get a lot of different looking stitches just by altering that and depending on what you're trying to do. So once you're right, let's take a look at what we've done here. I'll pull that off, cut, okay. And then there is our stitches. So you can see that's how we started. And we've got our stitches getting wider, really wide and really long, closer together, and then really skinny and close together. So that is how you can play around with your zigzag stitch. Now, one way that you can use your zigzag stitch is as an overlocking stitch, so a stitch to go along the edge of your fabric. And this is really useful if you've got raw edges in a project that you want to have sealed. So let's just quickly look at how we would do that using our zigzag stitch. So when we're doing an overlock style zigzag stitch, we want to do that along the raw edge of the fabric. So I'm going to do this edge here. And what I want to do is I usually like to do a pretty wide zigzag. So I'm going to do about 4.5. And then you want it to be also not too short. So I'm going to do 2.5. So just a regular stitch length is good for this. And then we'll take a look at it. So what we'll do for this is we're actually going to sew along the raw edge of the fabric. So we kind of want the needle to go into the fabric on the left and out of the fabric on the right. So I'm going to just position myself so that the raw edge of the fabric is just on the inside of the presser foot there. And then I'm going to lower my presser foot down. And then if you can see, the edge of the fabric is here. And then the needle is going to go in the fabric and then out of the fabric. So I'm going to step on the pedal, and I usually will start by, I'm going to hand crank the needle down into the fabric to start. And then, so if you notice, the needle is going in and out of the fabric. Oops. So let's do a little applique. Just a tiny little sample here. So if you wanted to applique a little patch, or if you wanted to sew something on, a zigzag stitch is another way that you could do that, and it's kind of a nice option. So with our zigzag stitch, I'm going to keep it at the settings that I've got right now, which are the ones that we did here. I'm going to maybe make them a little bit shorter so that the stitches are a bit closer together. So the same idea for this, if you want to do an applique, you're sort of going in the middle where you want to have one stitch on the fabric and then one stitch off onto the main. So this is going to give us a little sort of way to patch or applique fabric in place. And then you want to be able to pivot, so I'm going to just go back one stitch. Oops. I'm going to pivot, so the needle down. I'm going to pivot around my shape. I came a little bit too far, but that's okay. I'm going to sheet it back in. So I'm going to do one stitch off, and I'm just going to come in a little bit, make it a little bit better on the. So this one's in, so I'm going to pivot here, needle down, pivot around. So I'm just aligning the middle of my presser foot with that raw edge there. Needle down to pivot, and then I'm going to come back around. And then I'm going to put my needle down here. And then to stop, I'm not going to do a back stitch. I'm going to show you a little trick here. So if you want to have a clean finish, so let's say this is really going to be a patch on something, I'm going to pull that, cut your thread. And so now if we take a look, we've got these two tails here, and I didn't do a back stitch to secure it. So I'm going to show you a little trick. We're going to pull these tails to the back side. So this is the top. I'm going to flip this over to the back side. And then I'm going to find my bobbin tail. So this thread here is my bobbin, and this thread here is my bobbin also. So if you pull this thread here, you can kind of see when you pull it, it kind of pulls the loop from the top. So when you pull enough, you should be able to pull that loop from the top, and I just grab that little loop backwards, and then that has pulled the one thread to the back, and then I just have to pull the other one. So this is the thread for the other one, and when I pull on that, if you can see, there's a little loop there. I'm just going to grab that little loop. So pulling all that, and then if I flip it over, all those tails are in the inside now, so I can just hand tie these little knots here, and then I've got a nice clean finish. So if you want to do a clean finish on something, you can pull your threads to the back if you don't want to do a back stitch that's going to be visible. And that is a little easy way to do a patch just using a zigzag stitch or an applique. So you could do shapes, you could do mending, and you could play around with the settings for the zigzag stitch. So you could do it more dense than that, you could do it wider than that, and that's totally up to you. All right, and so that is the zigzag stitch.